Cole Crowley.
I'm Justin Green.
I'm Joey Mahalich.
And Jack Wyman.
Whoa, whoa.
I'm so sorry I'm late. I work at the Dow and Mike implemented a new rule, and so he doesn't let students leave early.
What's your name?
My name's Jordan. So this is Mike. This is the supervisor of the Dow Recreation and Wellness Center. He has been the director for the last 4 years now, since 2014. He has a whole bunch of jobs, so he kind of organizes all the different sports activities that go on in the Dow, like the intramural, and also when teams get together to have practice inside the Dow and in the swimming pool. And on top of that, he also looks after over 40 workers or student workers at the Dow. So he has a whole bunch of things that he has to take care of, and he's also in charge of all the funding that they have to distribute through figuring out like what kind of things they can buy and what they can't. So the Dow, they have four different student workers. They have student supervisors, which look over all the students that are there when Mike is not present. They have the front desk workers who sit at the front desk and make sure that people are swiping their card in, and make sure nobody that like from the town or like people are trying to sneak in or anything. And then there are floaters, which are pretty much like the cleaners of that time period, and they just go around making sure everything's clean. They have design jobs to do for the day. And then there's the equipment room, and they sit in the back equipment room and they sign out different basketballs, racquetballs, all sorts of different things. You go to the next slide. So when we came in and talked to Mike, obviously I work there, so I've already seen a couple of the issues, but when we went in as a group and talked to him and got a few more details about some of the problems going on at the Dow, and he brought up how there's always employees that do not show up for their shifts. And we'll go into all of these things later on. This is just a broad overview. Employees also leave early for their shift and arrive late, and this can create liability because there's nobody either at that front desk or the equipment room, and something could happen. And so we noticed that the shifts were too short, especially in the morning. Like kids are not going to want to come in super early and work for an hour. Again, we'll get into that later. And employees are not obeying their rules and their jobs, and we want to get Mike to hopefully enforce that a little better. So our goals for Mike is we want to increase the communication between the student workers and Mike, the supervisor. We believe that if the communication increases, then there will be way less problems. People will be not showing up late, and if they do happen to show up late, they're going to communicate with Mike. And Mike needs to communicate with the workers to make sure that if they're not doing the right job, they know they're not doing the right job. We also want to help encourage the workers to show up on time and make sure that they're staying for their shifts. And we're going to talk about a couple ways how we're going to implement and help Mike make sure students are being there on time. We're going to stay there the whole time. And we just want to eliminate any forms of liability that comes from students not being at their shift and at their stations at the time that they're supposed to be.
All right, so kind of going more specifics. When employees aren't showing up for shifts, there's the front desk that's just there. And when students swipe in their card, that shows the school how often the Dow is being used, and that in turn tells the school how much they should be funding the Dow for new equipment and all stuff like that. So currently, if you miss 3 days throughout the whole semester, you are going to be fired. But we wanted to have him get this from 3 warnings just down to 1. So if you were to miss 1, then you pretty much were on your last leash here. And then we believe you should come up with a new rule for anybody that doesn't show. So it's hard for him to keep track, but if the supervisors would help him out more and they could be on a little tighter communication, then the supervisors can let them know who's having notes and who's doing a great job.
This all goes back to improving communication.
So the second problem that we found out was that employees were leaving early. The first 2 bullet points kind of go hand in hand. The first one says try checking ACEs more frequently when people clock out. So when people are clocking out, they're doing it too early or too late. And then the second one says ban mobile and laptop clock in and clock outs. and make the students use the computers at the Dow. So I know a lot of kids, they'll go from work and then they'll go back to their dorms and then they'll sign out. So that way they get the extra 15 minutes or 30 minutes added to their paychecks, which is not right, and it's just a disservice to the Dow. And then the last bullet point is make sure everyone knows that if someone shows up for a shift and nobody is there from the previous shift, they need to tell them to leave early, so we can't have unattended stations and people are staying there for the full time, or if somebody needs to leave, somebody can pick them up.
All right, so this brings us to the third problem we have with Dow, the length of shifts. So currently the shifts range from 1 hour to 3 hours. And we find it to be a problem for students to only come into work for an hour, because say they're scheduled for a 6 a.m. shift, they're not going to want to come in for only 1 hour if you're waking up that early. Like, you're going to want to come in for 2 or 3 hours. So we said Mike should schedule shifts from a minimum of 2 hours, so students are more motivated to actually come into work and not miss their shifts. If it's the morning shift, we think make it 3 hours, and Gordon working here for a while.
I can testify to that.
Yeah. So we came up with a little equation here. It's the transitive property of the Dow. So we got longer shifts equal fewer shift changes, and then we got fewer shift changes equal fewer shifts missed. Transitive property of the Dow, longer shifts equal fewer shifts missed.
Nice. And the fourth problem we found is employees not obeying rules. So when you're walking through the Dow, a lot of times you'll see students on their laptops or on their phones with headphones in. This also goes back to the liability issue. If something were to happen while they're not paying attention, that's ultimately on Mike. So we thought that he needs to do a better job at disciplining people when they're not doing their job, and just simply walking around and seeing people what they're doing while they're working is one way to do that. And then we also came up with an idea of an anonymous complaint box. That would be from the Dow. They could write an anonymous complaint like, at 8 p.m. I was in the Dow and I couldn't get the attention of the rec room worker and couldn't get a basketball. So we thought that was something that he could implement, so not only he is making sure people are doing their job, but also people at the Dow can report on it. Next slide. And then kind of overall, we just thought that he needed a better way of motivating his employees. Obviously with student workers, it's kind of tough, especially with 1 hour shifts. You just show up, you clock in and you clock out, and there's very little accountability. So he needs to find a way to motivate these students to stay for their shifts and do the right thing. And basically, there's two ways to motivate someone, and that's rewards or punishments. As the Dow, with as little funding as they have, we thought probably punishments was the way to go. And that goes back to the accountability thing. He just needs to make sure that he's walking around, and if someone's doing something they're not supposed to be, that he needs to correct that right away.
So for everybody watching this, so we're doing a little quick recap so everybody is refreshed as to where we are so far. So we set our goals. We have our 3 goals: communication, improving our communication from Mike and the supervisors, the student workers, and make it one unit. The second goal is encouraging student workers to be responsible with time at the job. So they need to be, you be trustworthy with Mike. Make sure you're doing your whole shift. You're not leaving early. You're not having to pick up for somebody else. And then the third goal is eliminating liability issues, which happen when you leave the station unattended. Things can get taken, things can get broken, nobody would be there. Then you have your 4 problems that we found out about the Dow. The first one is the employees not showing up for their shifts. That's a reoccurring theme and something that we think that he could be more strict about. The second, employees leaving early. That's because students with the busy schedules and stuff like that, they think it's okay just to leave their station unattended, but it's not okay. The length of shifts, so bumping it, we can think that he can go even further with our transitive property. The length of the shifts will equal less shifts missed. And then our 4th problem, employees not obeying the rules. I think this comes down to just having a more strict policy, making sure these kids follow the rules. and then we are motivating our workers. I think that the punishment is going to be more effective than granting them rewards for doing well.
Alright, so making students pay attention. Because there's a problem with students paying attention, Mike needs to find ways to make sure they are attentive to the members coming in. This has been a problem because students have been wearing headphones or on their laptops consistently. And to do this, we're thinking about changing the key swipe machine. Instead of members swiping themselves in and have the students' workers take their card and swipe for them. So instead, like when you walk in, you can either swipe your card or you can type in your student ID number. But instead, we think that the student worker should have to take the card and swipe it or type in the student ID numbers to make sure that every person getting into the Dow is a member or a student college. This makes it so basically the student workers have to interact with every single person going in the Dow, and it just gets rid of the liabilities.
Like I said in the first problem, when everybody swipes in, it kind of lets the college know how much the Dow is being used. So if everybody really did swipe in like they were supposed to, the school would probably get the Dow more funds. So if they were granted more funds, this is a turnstile, by the way. It took me about 15 minutes to figure out what that was called. This would be great to make sure that the students were actually swiping in and swiping out. There are a lot of people that, I mean not a lot, but there are people that don't have access to the Dow.
A lot of people do.
They're still using the Dow. So that's not really fair to us or the people that actually do pay for a membership or have some type of membership with the Dow. This would make it a lot tougher for them to actually sneak in and use the Dow.
Alright, so we're gonna get down with the strictness now. So we thought that, like, we looked at it all, and we think that Mike is just overall he's kind of being soft on his workers a little bit. He needs to be a little more strict. Mike needs to be more strict with the supervisors because the supervisors are the highest level of student workers, and they should be held to a higher standard and be expected to let Mike know when someone screws up during their job and when they're working. They're being paid more money, and they have a lot more responsibility. So this is just making sure that they're setting good examples for the rest of the workers.
So the final outcome is so Mike has implemented, if you miss one shift, you're going to be fired. It's not 3 shifts anymore. He does have longer shifts now. Every single morning I get scheduled for at least 2 hours. Make sure that he works with everybody's class schedule to make sure that they're able to work longer. If you can't, he's going to find somebody else to take that shift. So everybody is working longer hours. And he says he thinks it does helped in the morning for students coming in and being more motivated. Students have been more attentiveness during their shifts. They're paying attention a little more. Mike's been trying to get on them a little bit more aggressively. And so with the computers, we want to just make sure Mike is telling all the students to log in on those computers instead of their phones, because a lot of times students will sneak out of the Dow, hop on their phone, and then log out, even though they left 10 minutes before that. But if they log into that computer, it tells Mike right away when they left, and so they can't be like mixing up the numbers at all. That's about it.
So we got any questions?
Dude.
We don't have time for questions.